Welcome to Federation Commander Tutorial number 3, Movement Part 1. Note here that I have a different camera setup now. The camera's fixed, so it should be better focused and not so shaky. In Federation Commander, movement is not Newtonian. You don't have inertia, you don't do vector math, it's just a game. So don't plan to do things like accelerate and then coast for the whole rest of the turn. You have to spend energy to move in this game. So let's start off a turn by calculating a baseline speed. Remember, at the beginning of each turn, each ship picks the speed that it's going to go on for the turn, a base speed. So let's say that Federation ship chose speed 16. That costs 16 energy for this ship. And the Klingon ship chooses speed 8. That costs 8 energy. That is the number of times that the ship will have an opportunity to move during the turn. I made this movement chart just to illustrate how movement works. You don't really even need a chart because it's so simple, but just to show you how it works, I made a little chart. So the Federation ship having a baseline speed of 16, each impulse, represented by these large bold boxes, is broken up into 4 steps. And if you're moving speed 16, you'll move on step 2 and step 4. And so the effect of that is over the course of the turn, you'll have 16 chances to move. The Klingon at speed 8 will have 1 chance to move during step 4 of each impulse, and will move effectively 8 spaces over the course of the turn. So for the purposes of this example, we're just going to move ships in a straight line. They're not going to turn, they're not going to fight. This is just a pilot's cadet training mission. So on impulse 1, during step 1, no ship has an option to move, so nothing happens. On step 2, ships going speed 16 have an option to move. That's the Fed ship. The Fed ship moves. Step 3, nothing happens. Step 4, both ships can move. Klingon ship moves 1, Fed ship moves 1. Impulse 2, same thing. Nothing happens on step 1, Fed ship moves on step 2. Nothing happens on step 3, Klingon and Fed ship move on step 4. And note that you don't really need tweezers for this game. I use these for other war games. You won't have many counters in a game of Federation Commander stacked up on the board. I'm using these so I can move the counters around and not have my fingers get in the way of the pieces so you can see what's going on. So that's simple movement. Now notice how at the end of each impulse during step 4, both ships move at the same time. Now in the future there are going to be options of things you can do, like turning, like not moving, during these opportunities to move. And so it matters which ship goes first. So this game has a system where if multiple ships are to be moved at the same time, the slower ship moves first. So in this case, the Klingon ship would move first because it has a baseline speed of 8. And then the Fed ship would move. If the ships were moving the same baseline speed, then the least maneuverable ship would move first. I'll get into that a little bit later and then in a future video on more complicated movement. So now in a second example, I'll add acceleration to the game. At the beginning of every impulse, so 8 times in a turn, all ships have the opportunity to accelerate. When you choose to accelerate, you effectively get the next higher baseline speed of movement for that impulse. So, for example, if the Klingon ship chose to accelerate on impulse 3, instead of acting like it has a baseline of 8, it would act like it has a baseline of 16. So it would effectively get 2 movement opportunities in the impulse, instead of the normal 1. Now, all ships have the opportunity to accelerate. Federation Commander uses what's called a Me Too system. Anytime a player announces that they're doing something, when there's an opportunity for multiple people to be doing something at the same time, for example, accelerating or firing weapons, etc. You can say you're doing something, and then anybody else can say, me too, and choose to do something at that same time. If you choose to do something, you cannot take it back if somebody else makes a decision after you. So you can only actively choose to do something, and then you're committed to doing it. That makes the game very smooth. You don't have to stop and call for a secret opportunity to write down decisions and then reveal them all, etc. So in this situation, the Klingon player chooses to accelerate. Let's say the Federation player chooses to not accelerate. So now they're both effectively going speed 16. But remember, the Klingon player still has a baseline speed of 8. That never changes during the turn. It's just effectively they're both in this box for this impulse. So impulse 1, nothing happens. Impulse 2, they both move. Since the Klingon ship has a lower baseline speed, it still has a baseline of 8. It moves first, but they both move. And then nothing happens on 3, and then on 4 again, they both move. So now, effectively, the Klingon player is keeping up with the Federation ship by having accelerated. But note that he had to spend another point of energy. So anytime you accelerate, you're spending as much energy as it costs you to move 1 hex for your ship. With both of these ships, it's 1 point of energy. So now let's do a third example. Let's include deceleration. Deceleration is different from acceleration. At the moment when it's your turn to move, when you have a movement option, you can choose to decelerate. Again, you spend energy equal to a point of movement and then stay in place. So let's say it's now impulse 4, and the Federation player decides, well, he actually doesn't get to decide yet. Let's say the Klingon player says, I'm going to accelerate. So now the Klingon player is using this box. Federation player does not accelerate. They're both using this box. Step 1, nothing happens. Step 2, Klingon ship moves. And now it's the Federation player's turn to move. And he chooses to decelerate at this moment. So he stays in place, pays the point of energy to decelerate. And now, step 3, nothing happens. Step 4, the Klingon player moves. The Federation player pays another point of energy, decelerates, stays where he is. Maybe he's trying to let the Klingon player pass by him so he can fire at him from behind. Who knows? So note that deceleration is inherently inefficient. Let's say that I wanted to move 12 hexes over the course of a turn. So from here, and my plan was to move to here by the end of the turn. I have a couple possibilities there. I could take a baseline speed of 8, which would cost me 8 energy, which would get me to here. And then over the course of the turn, I could accelerate 4 more times to get me all the way to that spot, which would cost me 4 more energy. It would cost me it cost me 12 energy to move 12 hexes, which is exactly what you'd expect to happen. I could also declare a baseline speed of 16, which would cost me 16 energy, and then I could decelerate 4 times at various points along this line. I could decelerate here and here, and then here and here, and then here and here. Each one of those would cost me an extra point of energy. So instead of 12 energy to move 12, it's costing me 20 energy to move 12. So why would you ever do that? Well, if you set a baseline speed of 8, you have the option of decelerating 8 times and going 0, or you could accelerate 8 times and go 16. If you set a baseline speed of 16, you could potentially decelerate down as far as you could spend energy to decelerate, and you could also accelerate up to 8 times to move 24. So you have a much wider range of options by going faster, but it's less efficient. So you have to factor in the game situation. Do you have energy to spare? Is it worth risking extra energy to be able to run off quickly or run in quickly? So the game situation will determine how you spend your energy. So that's it for movement, part 1. Thanks for watching.